why it is done, and then we'll see the counter-arguments why it should not be done, and then we'll go to the conclusion. I didn't want to embarrass you, but there will be some graphic photos on the slides. My goodness. The natural penis has the foreskin covering its head, and circumcision means to cut off the foreskin at the end of the penis and expose the glands. In other culture, in our cultures, circumcising boys is a social norm, and according to Dae-Shik Kim, he is the professor of University of Seoul, Seoul National University, and he said 80% of South Korean men get circumcised. So it's hard for us to analyze it from a different point of view at this moment. And before we start talking about it, I'd like to ask you something. Has anyone heard of female circumcision? Like most of you? Who thinks female circumcision should be stopped? Should be, it's definitely wrong. Okay, that's most of you, and I think the ones who did not put their hands up, they don't know what female circumcision is in Korean. What if we're doing the same thing to our children in Korea? In our culture, it's easy to point fingers to the cultures where they practice female circumcision, but we're silent about the male circumcision which is done around us, and it's equally distressing and painful to the kids. So what I want you to do is just for a moment set aside those massive experience you've had since you were young and just try to come up with a new perspective, a fresh angle. So why, for what, do we cut men's genitalia? The answers can be categorized into two domains: cultural reasons, which include religions, and the medical reasons. First, let's look at the cultural reasons. Circumcision is very universal in the Jewish, Muslim, and Christian cultures. And according to the WHO, 80% of all circumcised men are Muslims. The red parts are indicating where circumcision rate is more than 80%. And as you can see, these Jewish and Muslim cultures are colored red. And also, it's prevalent in the Central Africa, and it's practiced as a tribal ritual. So they have to go through it to be acknowledged as a true man. Well, because today's discussion is not, it's more about medical aspects, so I won't go too deep into this religion and the Africa stuff. But, we all agree that it's out of the question, because religion does not justify violence. Cultural differences should be respected, but it should not violate human dignity and human rights. Now let's look at the medical reasons. We're going to focus more on this part since it's why we Koreans do it. First of all, it cures phimosis. Phimosis is the inability to retract the foreskin over the glands. And circumcision separates the foreskin and the glands, enabling the retraction. And second is that to prevent UTI, the urinary tract infection. This argument was based on a study done in 1986 by a pediatrician, which I will elaborate more on the next part. And thirdly, it prevents sexually transmitted diseases such as HIVs. For this reason, the WHO actually promotes circumcision in some countries where the HIV rates are high. And lastly, it reduces cancers, especially penile cancer. And studies suggest there is a correlation between the penile cancer and the circumcision rates. As for South Korea, circumcision was introduced by American missionaries during the 1940s and 80s when America was deeply engaged in the Korean War. It was then considered a beneficial modern technique. Well, apart from the religious and medical reasons, there are several groundless beliefs, such as it looks better or it increases the size. And the circumcision increases pleasure during the intercourse. Yet, in spite of these beliefs and the medical beliefs, I will now tell you why the surgery is unnecessary and not worth it. Well, if you think about the reasons carefully, it seems that they're simply made up to justify, to make us feel more comfortable about what we're doing. First of all, I'm sorry, I should have warned you about that. First of all, phimosis. I told you it's the inability to retract the foreskin, but it's a problem found in usually under 3-year-olds, and less than 1-year-old. Over time, the foreskin naturally separates from the glands, and less than 1% of grown-up men suffer this phimosis. And if it becomes a problem after you reach 18, then the circumcision is an option. And secondly, the UTI, urinary tract infections. The study this argument was based on was conducted by a man called Wislov, who was a pediatrician. But they had some problematic instructions, because the experimenters asked the uncircumcised men to retract the foreskin and wash the inside with a soap. So, well, you can imagine how it messed up all the protective bacteria in it and the microbiome. So it was the instructions that caused the actual infections. And also, urinary tract infections occur by 1% in boys under 2 years old, and the majority of UTI cases occur in 1-year-old boys, so there's really no need to circumcise all the boys. Next, STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. And HIV is the most serious disease transmitted sexually. Circumcision does decrease the possibility of HIV according to the WHO, but the condoms reduce it by 95%. So unless you live in a country where HIV is really, really prevalent, you really don't need to circumcise yourself. Besides, some countries with extremely low rates of circumcision have equally low rates of HIV, while other countries with high rates of circumcision have equally high rates of HIV, just like the United States. If the circumcision was really the vaccine to HIV, you might have expected something different from that. Lastly, circumcision may reduce penile cancer, but it's not worth it because penile cancer occurs by 1 in every 100,000. That means, well, according to the professor there, that means more people can die from circumcision and circumcision-related diseases than the penile cancer itself. As you can see, circumcision does reduce the diseases, but by a very minimum extent. You can achieve the same effect by simply washing it on a regular basis. A famous obstetrician says you have a choice. You can choose either cut it off or just wash it regularly. And even if it mitigates the diseases by 100%, it doesn't, but just suppose it does. It's still not worth it, because just because a body part may give you trouble in the future, doesn't mean you have to cut it off. But it's the same with extracting all the teeth not to have cavities. The foreskin is there to serve its own function, just like every other body parts. It protects the glands and it keeps it moist, and it even has its own protective bacteria in it. So getting rid of it would cause you more trouble than the benefits. We've just looked at the counter-arguments for medical reasons. Now we'll look at the others. These are not based on any scientific studies, so I'll just go through it quickly. It looks better. No, well, it's difficult to determine between the two which one looks better. But definitely, there is no such thing like a perfect look of the penis. So, yeah, that doesn't make sense. And it doesn't increase the size of it. Circumcision has little effect on the overall size, but actually it makes it slightly smaller. And sensitivity. Sensitivity. According to many studies, the end of the foreskin is the most erogenous part of the human male body. And the purple parts are the most sensitive parts, which will be removed after the circumcision. It contains like 10 to 20,000 nerve endings. Also, as it moves like, it moves up and down. It stimulates the stretch receptor, So getting rid of this part means you'll be much more insensitive. This is from a Korean TV show called 마녀사냥, and you can see how much he's regretting his surgery. So, at some point in the future, when you have a baby boy, you should think a little carefully about circumcising him. And, well, we've looked at the alleged reasons, but religion does not justify violence, and medically the risks outweigh benefits. And for many other reasons, the body part should remain intact to serve its own functions. Today, I believe this 10-minute speech was worth listening to if it provided a new perspective, something we're not used to. Circumcision scars not only the children, but also the parents who want the best for their kids. I hope you know what circumcision really is before it's too late. Thank you for your attention, and there are some references, so you may ask if you need any.
Whoa, no.
Do you have any questions?
So,
Yes.
medical science is supposed to be based on science, right?
Yeah.
So, if a nurse can figure out in a week that, sorry, you're going to be a nurse, right, or a nursing student,
Yeah.
that circumcision is not medically justified, how can doctors still do it, considering the fact that they're supposed to be medical scientists as well as practitioners? Because it's still very common in Korea, right?
Yeah, it is.
So how can the doctors justify it?
Well, basically, they get paid for it. So maybe it's. I've seen a story about a nurse who rejected the surgery and told the parents that it's not good for their son's health, and then she got fired for it. So maybe a lot of doctors and nurses are reluctant to tell the truth, or maybe it's just the cultural thing. It's like it's considered abnormal if we do not go for that thing.
So it's kind of like the power of culture versus the power of science.
Oh yeah, and I've seen something like, Jewish have they are really controlling the American society. I mean, not 100%, but they have much power. So they go through the circumcision. So maybe they're trying to justify it by maybe making up some statistics or like that.
So you think in the past there was misinformation?
Yes, there was. Because in the past, it was only based on the tradition. They thought it was clean to do it. They didn't know that the outer parts have the actual functions, the important functions.
So how does the bacteria? You said it's the bacteria is protective.
Yeah. It's a protective bacteria that kills all of not everything, but that kills the bad things that comes into the foreskin. And maybe the number one reason why people get circumcised is that they think it's clean, but actually most of the bad material, the bad things that gets into the foreskin, it can be cured by itself. Yeah.
So the culture of circumcising in Korea existed because of the idea that it will be cleaner?
Yeah, and that comes from America, because North Koreans don't do it. It comes from it started from the 1940s and 50s.
So I noticed that the Seoul National University professor set up this kind of. He's not actually a doctor, right? He's something else. But there are some doctors who host his website. Dae-sik Kim. he's like his website. I noticed was last updated in like 2001, or had been going since 2001 or something like that.
The one you sent me?
Yeah.
I actually found this from somewhere else.
Okay. It just seems like it was something that he really tried to do a long time ago, but he hasn't had much success. Even though he's a SNU professor trying to spread this information, it hasn't spread very far, it seems. Like, what do you think is the current 2016 understanding of this issue?
Well, I've seen the statistics, and right now about half of the boys get circumcised, so it's like much less than the last century. I think it's starting to spread the right information.
So you mean more and more medical practitioners are not recommending it as a practice? And do you think parents are changing their minds about it as well?
Oh, but I actually asked my parents, and I have a little brother. I don't know whether he was circumcised or not, but my parents said they read an article and they thought it was unnecessary. So maybe my brother didn't get it.
Okay, so some parents do research and some parents don't.
Yes.
Any other questions?
You keep mentioning the word violence,
Yeah.
right? So you mean it's who regards it as like violence? Because people would do a joke, right? So
Well, in the case of female circumcision, the girls who get it do not know that it will be a harmful thing. And, well, even though they know some people are going to die during the process, they think it's the right thing because it's something that they have been injected since they were young. They think it's the right thing to do, and if they don't do it, it's a shame. And that violence happens in those Jewish and Muslim cultures. Well, it does not make sense in Korea because we do not think it a compulsory thing. It's like we do not think ourselves ashamed about not doing that, but in those cultures it is. So I consider it a violence.
also like the making it mandatory
Yeah.
is violence.
And like they do not let them know that it's a wrong thing. It's like they keep telling them it's the right thing to do, and that's another kind of violence, I think.
Professor, are there kind of practice in your country?
In the UK, Jewish people do it, and some people do it, but it's only for the medical reasons that
Yeah.
Anhi outlined
I think
that are
that
very unusual. Like when a child has a serious infection, then they'll be circumcised. But in most cases, men are not circumcised.
I've seen the research about the UK, and like more people did it in the past, but once there was like 15 kids dying because of the circumcision, and then a lot of them stopped.
Because of secondary infections. Mm. So they must have stopped before I was a kid because it wasn't even an issue for me. So I guess more than 40 years ago it was more common, but not now.
Just my opinion that, I think our body has our self-cleansing action.
Yeah, it does.
So I think we should act unnecessary for other medical reasons to harm our body.
And also, it's my own opinion too, but I think it's a bit violent too because isn't circumcision like done at a really young age where they're not realized and they're not given a choice? So maybe it's a violent action because it violates their decision.
Yeah, it does. Because I didn't actually mention it in this speech because it's done in like elementary school in Korea, but in the America and all the other cultures, they do it when they are infants, like when they're born, and they just do it without asking them. They think it's the right thing to do.
Very interesting point. On the website, on this Dysek Kim's website, there was an American who wrote in and said, I'm a teacher at elementary school, and a lot of boys come to me crying because they're going to have the procedure, and they don't want it. But then after they've had it, they all say, oh yeah, it's fine, no problem, it's great. Everyone should get it. And so that's just anecdotal, but it seems like because many men get it, they encourage other people to get it because it's like a cultural, maybe it's a psychological bias. You know, once you've bought a car, you think your brand of car is very good, right? Even if evidence shows that your brand of car is not as good as a different car.
Yeah.
And so I think this bias might be perpetuating the problem. So it probably would have died out earlier if it wasn't for the kind of cultural reasons.
It's kind of military in South Korea.
It's military.
Military service, like going to military is mandatory in South Korea, you know. And when a lot of people don't want to go to military, but once they finish their service, they think that people should go to military. Kind of.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. Like when they get back from the military, and when they have done this circumcision, they all think they have become more mature.
That's a. I think I've read something about that kind of like thinking bias. I can't remember quite where, but it's like it's so that you don't drive yourself crazy, right?
Yeah.
So that you can. Is it silver lining bias or something like that? But like, you want to look at any kind of experience that may have had some negative aspects as something that helped to shape you and help you to grow, because that's a kind of coping mechanism. If you didn't think that way, you would just get depressed, right? Okay. Okay.